Thank you for joining us. My name is Victor, and I am the librarian with the Youth Services Department here at Sacramento Public Library. We are excited to welcome you to the STEAM Youth Leadership Program series. This program is funded by the California State Library Stronger Together initiative.
We have the opportunity to engage in conversation with Maria Medrano. Maria is the CEO and co-founder of Aspidame.com, an equity-driven edtech firm that helps connect students with institutional knowledge and resources to navigate academic policies through their free virtual college navigation platform called TECO, T-E-C-O. Maria has also worked with companies such as Google, Visa, and Cisco in roles covering global diversity, public policy, vice president, chief of diversity officer, senior director, and as head of human resources operations for supply chain, as well as security and trust in other roles.
Maria, thank you for joining us today. Maria, I would like to introduce you to our cohort members, Ashlyn, Zoe, and Josar, who are ready to start a conversation with you about your personal journey as a Black, Indigenous, and Latinx STEAM professional. Go ahead.
Without further ado, I guess we should get into it. Maria, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself to start us off?
Absolutely. So I'm super excited to be here with all of you. Maria Medrano is my name, and my pronouns are she, her, and ella. And I'm connected wearing some, I call cheetah print glasses. My hair is long brown. I have my very gold dangly Mexican earrings and a jean jacket because it's a little bit chilly where I'm sitting. And I'm connecting from Alberta, California, which is about 15 minutes from downtown Sacramento. So still in Sacramento, California. I'll share just what I like to share about myself is I like to get personal. So I will get a little personal and just saying that I'm first generation Mexican American, born and raised in the Mission District of San Francisco. I am the oldest in my family and the only girl. So I have 3 younger brothers. So for those of you that are the oldest in your family or the only girls in your family, you know, that comes with a lot of responsibility. I'm also now a mom to 3 of my own children and married to my college sweetheart of 25 years. And so that is who I am. And obviously a daughter, a sister, a cousin, a god sister, a godmother, a tia, and so many other titles that I am honored to carry.
So I'm going to go ahead and take over. Hello. So for our first question we have for you today, how did your experiences growing up influence your decisions or contribute to where you are now today?
Oh, yes. So because I was the first born in my family and the oldest, I was the first to graduate high school. And so I was also the first to ever go to college. And I was the first in my family to ever know that even graduate school was an option. And so when you are the first in your family, it is very, very difficult, right? You don't know things. You don't know who to ask. You don't even know what questions to ask. And so what I can tell you that because I was the first in my family and the oldest, I had to figure that out in my own community growing up, right? My mom was very young when she had me. My mom was 16 when she had me. And so my mom and I grew up together very close. And we were always about trying to find information to try to figure out how we could get to and through whatever the situation that we were going through. And so I tell folks all the time that the privilege of being first generation high school and college graduate is that we are super collaborative, we're super agile, we can scale, meaning that we don't need a lot to get things done. And all of that has helped me tremendously in my career of being able to work with anyone that is interested in working with me and being able to partner and collaborate on projects and not looking at something and thinking, oh no, I can't do that. If anything, if I didn't know something, I would try to figure it out even more so. And I would always tell folks, tell me I can't do something so I can show you that I actually can. And that came from my upbringing, right? When folks would tell me, oh, you can't do that, or you can't afford that, or you don't have enough money to do that. It was always like, oh, well, we got to figure this out. I was always very curious about that. And so what I can tell you right now where I'm in my career, which I feel really grateful about being an executive and being a CEO of a startup, it's being able to lean on those experiences of being very, very young to know that we've been learning this, or I can say I've been learning this since I was 5 years old. Like I was the kid that would be taken out of class to help translate for my friends in school or for their parents who would come onto campus who didn't know the English language. And I get a lot of feedback from folks that I work with that say, gosh, you do this so well. How long have you been doing it? And I get to say, forever and a day, right? It's just when you're born and you're the first in your family, you have these skills that I want everyone to know on this call. I call them transferable skills. They're things that you're learning today, that you're learning now, that you absolutely will be able to say, I've done this and I can do this, and you can apply it to any role that you take in the future. So, so absolutely, I wouldn't be the person I am today if it weren't for my own personal lived experience. And I can tell you that the more time you spend in these executive C-suites or in these executive roles, there's this conversation, this topic about authentic leadership. And a lot of folks have a hard time talking about what does it mean to be authentic. And I'm usually raising my hand like, oh, let me tell you what that's all about, right? Because I can say I've had to be as authentic as possible since I was growing up in my community, because without that, you get lost in just all that's happening. And again, school wasn't the biggest priority, it was surviving. And now I get to translate that into surviving is the thriving piece, when you can bring the educational component, because that's what really gets to set you apart. So I would say it's my lived experience from a young age that really sets me apart today.
Speaking of your skills, do you think you developed any skills from specifically your educational background, or do you think that all this passion helped you get through your education and to where you are now?
That's a great question. I think it's a little of both. The education piece and what I learned going through college and graduate school, there were things that I learned there that I would have never learned if I wouldn't have gone, to college. Let me give you just some like simple things that I can remember. I had to start college 2 weeks before anyone in my class started. I started through a program called EOP, and they moved me onto the college campus 2 weeks before. And it was to show me the very basics of what it was to be on a college campus. And it was as simple as going into the lunchroom and realizing that when they would sit us down for lunch, it would provide us a salad. And in my neighborhood, we didn't eat much salads, right? There was just, we couldn't afford the salads and from the salads that they would have on the college campus. And so when they would serve us these salads, I remember thinking, I would say this to my friends, like, they want us to eat grass? Because for me, I'm like, this looks so different. It was not what I was used to. And so that's one simple experience, down to going into working in teams and like really having to hold people accountable and really having to share feedback around, you worked on this project or you didn't do this part and I did my part. Those are things that absolutely, if I wouldn't have had the chance in the educational system to practice it, I wouldn't have known what that would look like going into the corporate workplace. But at the same time, the passion and the drive that I had internal, you couldn't compare it to most in my class, because I was hungry. When I say I was hungry, I was like, I was determined. I was going to be the first to graduate. I was going to be the first, to get that diploma. I really, really wanted that. And I know that that also set me apart, because those in the corporate world didn't really get that experience from other folks. And so they would come to me with a lot of opportunities because I was always open to the yes and, even when I didn't know what I was doing. And something came to me, it was like, yes and I'll figure it out. So I think it's both. It's both my personal drive, who I am as a person, but then the fact that I spent the time that I did in an educational setting, that if I wouldn't have spent that time there, there's no way I could have, been inside of a corporate environment feeling comfortable as to who I am as a person. And I think I would have left more of the imposter syndrome take over. Not to say I didn't have it, because I definitely had it starting, but I think I would have let it take over, which that's not something that would have been good for me or for others, in my team. And so I think even down to just who I am as a person, I consider myself very, bilingual and bicultural, that I think that both things really did serve me. And that's why I spend so much time doing what I do within SpeedAme. It's not just saying that education is going to be the one thing that's going to work for you, but it's going to be a huge advantage point. The other piece is bringing yourself, your full authentic self, to the work to really ensure that you can show the world that there's amazing talent that look like any, like different people and different shades and different sizes, but that it's about giving us all an equal opportunity.
Can you talk a little bit more about that culture shift when you went into university? How did that affect you, and how did you really work on adjusting? And maybe what would you say to a student currently experiencing something similar?
So it's definitely not going to be easy. So I'm just going to put it out there. But anything that's worth going after, it's not meant to be easy, right? If it were easy, then everyone would do it. So just know that those 2 weeks that I mentioned that I had to start college before the rest of the school did, there were 35 of us that started. And of the 35 of us, only 5 of us actually graduated 4 years later. So those are very real statistics, right? That it's not easy, but you have to find your group. You have to find your support. I hope that you guys will count on us at Deco Guide to download us, because we want to make sure you have your answers, because it's hard. I remember those first 2 weeks, I cried to sleep the first 8 days because I missed home. It was sad days. And I remember they had told us in that program that we could not go home for those 2 weeks. And we're thinking, like, why not? And I'm glad they did that, because I know that if I would have went home, I don't know if I would have wanted to come back, right? It makes it that much more difficult. There were many times in the classroom where you were the only one. I was the only one that looked like the way I look. And there would be lots of conversations that were being had in different class settings, and lots of assumptions, lots of questions, lots of statements that, again, people were projecting their fears around the reality of things. And so that is one thing that I want to make sure everybody realizes here, that it is definitely not the easiest, but it absolutely is a place you need to be. That was the one thing that was very clear to me, that I had to continue to be on this college campus, even if I was only one of 15 Latinas that were there on campus, because if we're not there, then how can we have our voices heard and represented? And so when you think about the college piece, that's what's most critical, is that you are so unique, your lived experience down to what you want to learn, that is what makes the magic around being on a college campus, that you get to bring that and also ensure that others can get to see the magical person that you are, because you'll find real, true, lifelong friends. And I remember that was something that someone told me when I was getting ready to go to college, that those college years are super special. You find friends that become lifelong friends, and people that you will have your back, and those that will be your network that everyone is going to eventually grow up and become adults and go into the world and do amazing things. And so when you're spending this time like preparing and getting ready and thinking about college, just think about the fact that it is so amazing that it's worth fighting for. It's worth ensuring that you do everything possible to ensure that you are staying there, no matter how long it takes you. I've had friends that it took 10 years. I had friends that it took 7 years. I had friends that did it in 4 years. Whatever it is, there's no perfect recipe. The biggest recipe I tell folks is just that you have to get in, through, and complete. And then hopefully once you're done with your bachelor's, you'd be willing to go get a graduate degree.
Thank you. That was wonderful. So during this time that you had at university, when and how did you discover what you wanted to do lifelong?
Great question. So in my community, my teachers were my biggest heroes. They were the heroes in our community. So when I was growing up, going to high school, and also when I went to college, I was going to become a teacher. That's all I really knew, was it, because those were like I said, the heroes in my community. I ended up changing my major to business, but it was not because I knew what business was, nor because I knew that was an actual opportunity for me. It was that I quickly realized after the first semester that I had to continue to work full time in order to go to school full time. And so I was working an 8-to-5 job, and the classes that were offered in order to major in, say, a liberal studies program so they can get that teacher credential were only offered during the day between 8 and 3. And so I quickly realized I couldn't take the classes I needed to get to that major. And so because I had to work to pay rent, work to pay my car, put gas, food, because financial aid is helpful, but it's not the full thing that's needed, right? When you're going to school. And so when I realized that I had to work, and I also, like I said at the beginning, I was determined to graduate from college. I remember meeting with an advisor, and an advisor just showed me what classes were available. And as I started looking at classes, the classes that were actually made available in the evening were business classes. And since I had grown up in an environment where I spent a lot of time working from the age of 12 to 18 in tax and immigration offices, I was really comfortable with numbers, and I was comfortable with the element of understanding what a business did. I didn't know how to study it per se, but I knew that it existed. And so it was for lack of wanting to drop out, because like I said, I was not looking to drop out whatsoever. And just realizing that I could do the school thing in the evening hours and work in the daytime. That's what worked for me. And so after the first and second semester, I was just taking classes. Then I realized that I was taking classes towards this major called business. And that's how I ended up with the business degree. And my business degree is in marketing, business administration with a focus on marketing. And I never held a job in marketing. Like if you look at my background, it's been in the element of business. I've done lots in finance. I've done lots in operations. I've done lots in diversity and inclusion. But for me, it was just getting that diploma, which is the reality for many students, right? Where there's not certainty around what you should be studying in order to get to that career and that next role. And that's what I always spend a lot of time. It's like, and many times it's just getting the experience of actually getting through a college degree that can demonstrate that you are able and capable of getting that degree. And that degree doesn't necessarily have to talk to who you are or what you can do. That's in service for whatever you want it to be. And that's the mindset that I put on for myself. And it's worked.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So from a business major, right? How did you get from business into the technology industry?
Oh my gosh. So because I was working full time, as I mentioned, I was always in a business setting. And that's what I tell many folks now, like everything that we do is business, right? Every industry that we touch is business. When I was working full time, as I mentioned, doing my undergraduate degree, I was working as a receptionist for a tech startup, which I didn't know at the time, but it was a tech company by the name of Diamond. And they were actually producing a real player, which I'm sure none of you know because it's before you were all probably born, but it was the first MP3 player before the iPod was even created. And they had introduced an online auction store before eBay was even a thing. Right. So that is where I got my awareness and understanding of the business piece and the transaction piece in the technology sector. And I started doing that as I was doing my bachelor's degree. So I was learning the school stuff and actually applying it in my day job. And I did it the entire way through of college, all the way through graduate school as well. And so by the time I got to my graduate studies, well, that's when I realized that I wanted to do more around the consulting piece. That's why I went after a organizational development master's program, which is all about org effectiveness and org design. And so I feel like for me, every time I was taking that step towards that degree, I was learning more about what this would mean in my actual job. But in no time, and this is what I want to make very clear, did I ever dream and say I was going to have this role in this type of company. I just was very adamant about ensuring that I learned in everything that I did. And it's worked out that I've been in this tech sector and the tech industry. And it's aligned to who I am as a person, because when I think back to who I was as a young kid, I definitely have always been an entrepreneur at heart. And I've realized one thing that I really, really am grateful for is that technology has served as that equalizer, that regardless of the fact that I started, I would say in -10 because, my mom was 16 and we grew up on social services and we didn't have any support, that the people that I work with and people that are on my teams have gone to the Harvards and the Yales and, these big prestigious schools. And that's when I say it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that where you start is going to determine where you end up and what you are able and capable of doing.
Next one. Can you tell us about your first management role that you had?
First management role was at a construction firm. And the construction firm, it wasn't that we were doing construction. We were actually the temporary labor that would then deploy the talent for construction sites. And I remember being 20 years old. And I remember it was one of the hardest roles that I had because many on my team were much older than me. And it was more of that, how is she going to know how to be a manager, right? And I remember some of the folks that reported to me had children that were my age and older. But again, I came to the role given the experience that I had and the jobs that I had, and also the educational pieces because I was going to school and bringing a lot of that element. It was the first role that I had where I got to travel, which was a new thing as well, where I had to travel to Texas and I had to travel to a few other states here. And it was managing teams that were not, what we call it, co-located, meaning that the team members weren't in the office that I was actually sitting in. There were some were there, but many others were in other locations, and many others were also outside of the state. And so just, I think back often, I'm like how young I was, but traveling to meet with the employees and really being able to provide leadership, because when you're a manager, that's your responsibility, is how you're ensuring that you're supporting your talent, you're supporting the team, you're helping them, either get unstuck on certain projects they have, or helping them whatever goals that they may have for their own career. And I carry that with me today, because today I have lots of teams that I manage, and I have lots of teams. I have a lot of leaders that are managers on my team. And so now I'm leading more senior folks, and the principles are the same. It's, how do you ensure that you can meet people where they are? How do you ensure that you have the opportunity to provide engaging opportunities for employees to do meaningful work, but also that meaningful work can translate into what they want to do next, so that you can see that your talent is growing and growing. And that's probably one of the biggest pieces that I take from my job today very seriously, is the responsibility I have to help others reach their goals and reach their full potential. And it really started from that very first management role that I had. It feels like very long ago now.
Thank you. So what are some challenges you faced throughout your career?
Oh, where do we start? It's been a lot. So first for, being the mom that I am to my kids are 20, 17, and 13, right? So they have been alongside me since day one, meaning that when I graduated from my bachelor's degree, I was 7 months pregnant of my daughter. And so when I think about my career, they've seen me, in the ebb and flows of my career. And so there was that piece of the mom guilt, right? Of like, am I home enough for my kids? But I also love my career. So managing that was always very difficult. This whole notion of the imposter syndrome, I never wanted to be in a role where I felt that I couldn't be my authentic self. And navigating that inside of the walls of work was always really, really important. I can tell you there were many times that I had to hear things like, why are you so curious? Just focus on what you're doing now. Don't worry about that next role. It'll come when it's your time. And I was always thinking, like, I don't know if there's going to be a next time per se, right? I was hungry. Like I wanted to learn and like I said, be a sponge and do as much as I could. And it was just managing those pieces, even more so because I didn't have anybody I could ask. It wasn't like I could ask my mom or an aunt or someone, like, how do I manage these conversations? Because, my mom worked in an office setting, but she was never a manager, right? She never managed a team. And then by the time I started getting into more senior roles in the company, she started then working at the local high school because she wanted to be more local in the cafeteria. My dad was always a union worker working in warehouses. I didn't have anyone at home that I would say that I could ask that little question, like a scenario question whatsoever. And so that made it very difficult. When I think about how I was able to kind of get through it all, was really trying to find employees inside of the company that I could relate to, that could give me some guidance. And these are things of even just negotiating a salary increase. Like who are we to talk to about that, right? Or, going through a review. As an employee, every year you have your employee review. And, for the most part, I was blessed that most of them were very positive, but there were a couple of times where reviews didn't go as well as I was hoping. And who do you process that with? Or who can you ask a question of? And so when I think about what has been the biggest obstacle, it's just being acknowledging the fact that being the first in your family comes with a lot of these obstacles, and also at the same time giving yourself grace, right? Giving yourself grace and knowing that, gosh, you're a pioneer. Like now I can say, like, gosh, like I went through a lot and I'm still standing, like I've done a lot of things. And that's why I spend so much time sharing and giving back as much, because I didn't know 99% of the things I know now. And a lot of it wasn't just because I learned it in the classroom. It was because people stopped to actually give me guidance or to give me some coaching. I can remember the first time I realized what a mentor was. and people explaining like, oh, mentors are super important. Well, why are mentors important? I didn't know that going through school. I learned this on the job, right? And then the difference between what a mentor and a sponsor is, and the difference between, I mean, you just fill in the blank. There's so many of those pieces. And so for me, I would say the most challenging piece has been just being the first out the gate, and, perhaps not always realizing what my true voice, should have been in the moment, because I was trying to figure things out. Now I can speak all day until I'm blue in the face around like what's the right and the wrong and the indifferent. But I look back to when I was in my 20s and my 30s, and that lack of confidence that sometimes was in there, when I felt that I deserved more money or more pay or more responsibility, and not having a place to turn to. So that's why I think it's super important, even in your prior questions about having that safe space, that safe group that you can really go to. Those are people like your teachers. Those are people like, the cohort that you're a part of here in the library. I mean, folks that actually are there. Everyone has had some experience, and it's just super important that you have that group that really, really help you, because you can't do this alone. And there's always going to be some challenge. And the last thing I'll say on this as well is there's a big difference between like a challenge that gets in your way, and there's and then a difference of having a challenge that makes you feel uncomfortable, that's actually preparing you for growth. Because that's the other piece that I've learned that was very, very important, and I still holds true for me today, is the most important thing that you can do as you're kind of going through your career and going through school is being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because that's when you know that you are growing and you're learning. So you don't get that confused as to, not wanting to continue to drive forward, whatever it is that you have on your goal sheet.
And thank you so much for that. So kind of to piggyback off of that, what challenges have you faced not only as a Latina, but as a woman in this industry?
I think the big piece is it really goes down to, and this is my own piece, right? This whole survivor's guilt. And folks would be like, what do you mean survivor's guilt? But, I was the first, and for a very long time, I was the only one that had finished college in my family, and even in my community. And so that came with a lot of privilege, where I've gotten to travel the world. I've gotten to lead amazing teams. I've gotten to travel across the United States, much less travel the world. And there comes that piece that when I would travel, it was always that, gosh, I wish I could take, I wish I could take someone with me. And let me be clear, I did. For many, 95% of my trips, it was always, was I bringing my mom along or my dad along or a sibling along, just to expose them a little bit more to what would be possible, because I knew that without that exposure, they could never have the opportunity to see New York or DC or Florida, you fill in the blank, right? There's so many opportunities. And so as a Latina and as a first gen Latina and as a woman, I think it's just always been finding that balance of when is it okay for me to give myself a little grace, able to say like, I've earned this and I deserve to go on this trip alone, or I deserve, to go splurge on something, but then also ensuring that I'm not forgetting about, my community and my family, because that's super, super important to me. And it's, I call it out because I can tell you, I sit on a lot of executive leadership teams at these really big companies, and not everybody really has to think about that, right? I mean, I get many of my peers who their families are pulling together a family vacation to take all 30 of them to some exotic island, and they're complaining because they have to go spend a week with their parents. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could, if I could have that opportunity. And so it's always just being able to ensure that there was a clear understanding on what is most important to you, and not giving that up. And because I'm Latina and first gen, that's always family. Like, family is so important to me. Being able to provide for them is very important to me, but also ensuring that I strike that right balance, that by providing for them, I'm not giving myself away so much in my job that I then become unavailable for them. So that's probably been my biggest thing that I still to this day, I pay a lot of attention to, because I don't want there to be a time where, I'm hopefully blessed enough to be sitting in a rocking chair reflecting in all that I've done, and that my family don't know who I am as a person. So that is something that I'm constantly very mindful of. And it's something that I've always been thinking of since I've started, because it's just a double whammy. When you're a woman and you're Latina, It's very known that you have to work twice as hard, and it's something that you recognize and you contribute to, but then you also create that space to take care of yourself.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. Always remembering what's important to you. But speaking of people who may not have the same opportunities as you, earlier you mentioned how technology is an equalizer, and I believe that's what your company Inspirame is about. So could you tell us a bit about Inspirame?
Oh, yes. So Inspírame, our mission is, I like to tell people, it's pretty simple. Our mission is to help end generational poverty through educational attainment. And the way that we're doing that is that we've created an app, which is Teco Guide, which is free to the public. It's on the Apple Store, on the Play Store. And it's to just provide additional exposure. So like I shared earlier, the heroes in my community were teachers, and that's all that I knew. And so when folks would ask me, what do you want to be? I'd say a teacher, and which is great, right? But there are so many other careers and so many other opportunities to be able to give people the opportunity just to be able to participate in some which way or form, right? It could be a 12-month certificate, it could be an 18-month certificate. And so that is what Inspírame is all in service of. Inspírame is Spanish for inspire me. We believe that people just need a little bit of inspiration just to find what they need to get going. And the way that we develop the app is that we want to ensure that everyone that's ready to go on that journey, they feel that they have somebody in their back pocket, which is Teco Guide, that has their back, can answer their questions, and can keep them motivated along the way. So we capture a lot of stories of people that look like us, and we share those so that when folks get stuck or discouraged, they can hear those stories. So they realize that they're not alone in that. We also provide a lot of the coaching and the advisement from a college perspective, and certificates and apprenticeships, because we realize that there are so many paths. It's not necessarily always going to be the 4-year degree or going to graduate school, but there are certificates programs that will work now. And then when you're ready, you can apply more. And so that is what Inspírame is all about. We want to build California's, what we say, high school to college to career pipeline. And so that is why we want to make sure that we're connecting with as many youth, but also connecting with a lot of teachers and educators, and really ensuring that and we like to tell this to people, when someone tells you you got to go to college, no one really tells you how to go. Right. And so when we want to be that place, and when someone says, you know what, you need to be going to school, just period, just school, whatever that may be, that you can say, download this app, and they'll help you along the way, because that's what we're looking to do, is just provide the guidance and provide the guardrails that are necessary to ensure that you can get in the quickest, most affordable way possible. And if possible, free as charge, because I don't want more and more school debt, because it's not fun to have to pay so many of these big loans when there's so many resources out there to support us.
Thank you. That was so great hearing about just all of the different areas that you guys cover. Can you tell us about the journey starting that and how you were able to come to what you have now?
Yes. So I married my college sweetheart, who's been a college counselor for the last 20 years. And so it's kept me very proximate and very grounded to the reality of students having support and having the lack of support. Many conversations on students that have, come to see him that have said, I've tried to get an appointment for the last 3 months. And luckily that student was persistent. We know many more just can't have that. Life happens and they're not available. And so after doing this for 15 years manually, because we've always opened up our home to just help families, and not just the students, but many parents as well, who are just trying to figure out how they can support their children or their adults, whoever may be in their household. I told my husband, like, there has to be a way that we can scale this with technology, because I've had the privilege of working in the technology sector. And so I reached out to some folks that I've done engineering projects with. This was back in 2019. And talked to them about what we've been doing very manually, and talked about the vision that we had in creating an app that would be free, that would have what I call a holistic approach, right? Motivation, inspiration, guidance, degree plans, pathways, and then really being able to have that bridge between, once you get your degree, bridging into careers. Because I've spent the last 20 years in these corporate roles where the conversations we have is that we can't find amazing talent. And it's very true. All these big tech companies constantly talk about how they can't find amazing talent that is diverse. And so because I was at the table having those conversations, I would be the first to always say, we need to be connecting the community colleges. It's not just these universities, but there are so many people in our community that if they knew what opportunities existed, I know they would apply themselves. And so that is where Inspira was born out of 4 years ago, to start building the blueprint for how we would create this app. I hired a team of engineers in India because I used to spend a lot of time in India with our engineering team. It's a way for us to be able to create the engineering team that's needed to build this app, because it's taken 3.5 years to build it. It's not been easy. And so as we've been building that piece, then I've been also continuing to establish the relationships with many of the educators that are very eager to find a different way to really support our students. And it begins even in high school, right? Just to ensure that our high school students know what opportunities exist, and not to mention the students that are currently in the system, in the college system. And so January of this year of 2023 is when I decided to officially step away from, at that time I was at Google, to really put a focus on the business side of this technology. And that is where I've been spending a lot of time connecting with potential customers, connecting with a lot of partners, especially in our nonprofit space, because many nonprofits are also very eager to ensure that we can improve the educational outcomes of our most underserved communities. And their dependencies are on partnering with the community colleges, but there's just not enough hours to get that partnership done. And that's where we step in and kind of broker those relationships. So I guess what I could say is, it's been something we've been doing for quite a long time. We've just brought in the technology piece to it over the last 4 years. And it wasn't until this January that we've actually turned on the light switch to say, yes, we're in town. So you can follow, for those of you on TikTok, you can follow us on TikTok. We're Deco Guide is on TikTok, and you'll see we have 20,000 followers, all organic. And we have many folks that are downloading our app, and we're partnering with community colleges and universities very soon.
Thank you for that. Obviously, Inspira is something that you've grown out of your heart to help students. So what are some responsibilities that you have with this company?
So my title there is CEO and co-founder. So my responsibilities is making sure that that light stays on and that it stays free to our community. That's the biggest piece. This work is so much bigger than me or my husband now put together. That is the biggest piece. And so every day that I go out there and I share what we're doing, it's finding partners that have shared synergies, that are really interested in ensuring that we can keep the lights on and can keep this going for generations to come. Obviously, then it's also building the team that's necessary to scale to support all the work that we're looking to get done here. And then the third piece is around being able to share the story, like share the story of genuine desire to do good, and to really ensure that we're leaving legacy work here. In full transparency, Inspírame, like I said, we've been doing it for quite some time, but my mom, who was my best friend, she passed away very unexpectedly at 59 years young 2 years ago. And when she passed, that was that piece that just really connected for me, because I realized that the only difference between myself and my 124 first cousins was that I had a mom in my corner who was constantly telling me that she loved me and that I could become whatever I wanted to become, even when she didn't know what that could be, because she had no clue. She had no clue what it could be. And so that's what Inspírame, the essence of Inspírame is just exposing and providing that encouragement so that folks know that they can become whatever they'd like to become. And we're excited for what that can mean for our communities at large.
Oh, that's great. I love hearing about what you guys want to do. What do you want to get out of this company? What skills do you feel are important to be able to accomplish all of this in your specific role?
I would say the skill of always wanting to learn, super important. I've had to learn and relearn and unlearn some things. I think the important skill of follow through and follow up are really, really important, meaning that if you say you're going to do something, do that thing. It really does matter. That goes back to credibility, and it goes back to people trusting and being able to know that they can count on you for whatever it may be. And the roles that I do right now, it's all about trust, and it's about, what people are looking for. When I think about what I'm doing at Inspírame, it's people's personal lives. I mean, when people are reaching out to me, they're reaching out because they really don't feel they have what it takes to do that next thing. And so I'm constantly in their corner telling them they have what they need, and they have exactly what they need for taking that next step. And if I'm not there to ensure that I can support their request, then who am I to try to ask them to continue to trust in our intention for what we can do for them? So from my perspective, it's all about follow through. It's about being comfortable in learning, unlearning and relearning when necessary, and being very, very consistent in your approach and in any of the work that you do. If you can't do something, then just say you can't do something, because I think the biggest piece that I've seen for those that have been on this journey is trying to do a lot and then not delivering anything. And that really gets in the way of what can be possible, because every step you take in your personal and your professional role will lead you to something greater. And so it does really matter how you treat people, how you give in whatever situation you may have, because everything comes full circle. And that's probably what I've learned most over the last 2 years, which has been really, really important.
Maria, thank you so much for your time. This has been great hearing from you. We do have one more question. Maybe to end this off, can you give us, maybe students watching, just a little bit of advice in their journey, going through their careers? And if there's anything else you want to say to young people watching this interview, just go for it.
Yeah. So I would say that your journey is not ever, it may be a straight path. If you're one of the lucky ones, it's a straight path. Great. Celebrate that. But for the most part, enjoy the zigzag. There's going to be the ups and downs. And that's just really the essence of what so many people have to live with. And so when you think about what you have to look forward to, just be prepared for that there's the highs and the lows and everything that you do, and don't give up. If anything, fail fast and fail forward. It's really true around that piece, because when you're failing fast and failing forward, that's when people are watching, and they're watching to see, what are you going to do next? When I think about my own career, it was those times where it's like, gosh, I thought it was supposed to be this one door I was supposed to walk through. And when that door closed, I thought it was all over. And in reality, that wasn't the door I was supposed to walk through. I was supposed to walk through a second door. And so just be super, super mindful of that. Know that, again, it's not going to be an easy journey, but you have what it takes. And the most important piece is to ensure that you are living a life that is genuine to who you are, authentic to who you are, that brings you happiness and brings you joy, and that you think about your whole self, meaning the whole well-being, all in all, because there's no fun in working really, really hard to get to this like really, really fun part in your journey and then not be there to truly, enjoy it. And so just know those pieces are super, super important. Lean on each other, reach out. You're never alone. And I can guarantee you that if you ever reach out to myself included, anyone about a particular question or particular desire to learn something, people are always wanting to be there and be supportive. And so I hope that we at Inspirame will have an opportunity to support you on your journey. So please do not be shy, and feel free to reach out at any time.
Thank you so much for that. I believe we have a bit of time for a Q&A for the rest of the cohort, but I think Victor is in charge of that. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Maria, Josar, Ashlyn, and Zoe. We're definitely going to open the room for all of us. If you can please turn your cameras on so we can have a chance to have a direct conversation with Maria. Does anyone here would like to ask a question to Maria?
And any question you'd like to ask, I'll answer.
I had a question for Maria. So you did mention that you were the first person in your family to go to college, and you did mention that it was important to have mentors. So did you, during your journey from like a kind of a first generation college student, did you have any mentors, or what support systems that help you through college to where you are now?
Yes, I did. I had many mentors, many of them that were teachers and instructors on campus. I was also a part of a couple of clubs. For instance, at Sonoma State, I was part of the Mecha Club, and I looked for mentors there as well. I'll also, Mimi, just be very clear that there were mentors. Sometimes there were situational mentors, as we call them. Like it was a particular person that was helping me through maybe a particular scenario that was happening, maybe with the professor. Maybe I didn't get a grade that I thought I deserved. And so I would get some mentoring as to how I could approach that topic with the teacher. Then I had those mentors that were more long-term mentors that were guiding me through, kind of getting me through, the higher education scene. I would also say that my family played a big role. So I had very supportive parents, both my mom and my dad, who very much supported my educational journey. And like I said, they didn't necessarily know how to support me, meaning that they didn't know what you did in the college setting. They just knew that it was important that I be there. And so their care of me, of, when I would come home on the weekends, that my mom would wash my clothes, or, they would make me food that I would take back to my dorm because I would miss their cooking. And so they were definitely part of my support system. And then who I decided to hang out with while in college really mattered as well. I have two really good friends to this day that were part of my classroom, and they were very aligned around what we were looking to get done and accomplish. And they're still around to today. So just have all played a really, really important role.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maria, does anybody else here would like to ask Maria questions before we finish our conversation with her this afternoon?
I have a quick question. So earlier, you talked about how you worked in the daytime, and then in more the evening time you would like go to school. So how was like time management for you, and how were you able to like handle both?
Yeah. Time management is super important, Rosa. I remember the day that I had to realize that I had to work full time. I remember calling out to one of my mentors and just saying, how am I going to do this? Like working full time and going to school full time. And I remember that mentor said, well, it's called time management. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was a thing. And so carving out the time for homework, right? Because when you're going to school, there's homework, and then there's project time, and then there's kind of that downtime that you need. And so for me, I was just very intentional around the fact that I would go to sleep at a certain hour, I would wake up at a certain hour, go to work. And then while at work, people knew that I was a student as well. So how I would use my lunch hour, if it was to work on a project or whatever it may be, it was just being very, very intentional. The other piece, my family knew that I was going to school, that during the school semester, I wasn't necessarily at every family party, which was a big thing that I had to talk to my family about, because how dare I not go to my primo's bautizo or whatever it may be, right? There was always la comadre's quinceañera or whatever it was going on, but just being very honest around the fact of what I needed to get done in order to get through these semesters. And I remember very vividly that every semester that I completed, I would celebrate. I was like, okay, I got 4 more classes down, or I got 5 more classes down. And then during that break, those 5 or 6 weeks, really spend the time then with family, so they could realize, and I can get them on that rhythm. So they understood, oh, it's school and time session. They know that she's busy working and going to school, but during breaks, we'll see her. So that's what worked for me. I think it's just more important that everyone have a time management schedule to be able to reach your goals in anything that you're doing. But I think it did help, and it set me up for success even to where I am today, where I wear many different hats. And it's all about allocating the right amount of time to get all those things done.
I have one question. How can we get in contact with you?
Yes, so you can reach me is anybody on LinkedIn? Anybody on LinkedIn here? If you're on LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn, Maria Medrano, and you'll find me on LinkedIn, and you can request to follow me there. The other piece I would say is on if you're on TikTok, you can follow us on the Deco Guide, which is a great way to keep in touch with us, because you'll be hearing from me and from my husband as well, and we'll be providing some releases there. But I would say those two probably are the best places to be in contact with me. Also on Instagram, the Deco Guide is also there, and you'll find us there, and you'll see that there's things that I include on that piece as well. And I'm constantly receiving those messages. So those are definitely ways that you can connect with me and keep in touch. And then, Victor, if you want to share my email address with your students as well, you can do that as well. I'm always happy to connect. I love to have pen pals, so I'm happy to always be in conversation if it's helpful.
Of course, Maria. Thank you. Maria, we definitely want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and chat with us, to give us a bit more insight about your personal journey through the STEM field. And thank you so much again for being part of this program.
Of course. Thank you all. I wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to keeping in touch with all of you.
Thank you.